Hello and welcome back to 53 Stitches. My name is Claire and I'm the creator behind all of the crochet goodies that you see on this channel. I've been working on a no-sew cat crochet pattern for a little while, and when I watched the Kpop Demon Hunters movie on Netflix, I got really excited about trying to see if it fits the cute little tiger character that they had in that movie. So today we are making a low sew derpy tiger. There's no sewing in the actual crochet construction part of it, but there is a little bit of embroidery detail, so I don't quite want to call it no sew. And today we're going to go through all of the steps to create your very own cute tiger crochet. So I've got all of the materials that we're going to need today. We have some stitch markers to help us see what we're doing, a yarn needle for sewing on details at the end. I've got a pair of 12mm safety eyes. These ones have yellow colouring on them in the clear portions, and these particular ones have an offset pupil, but a centre pupil or even a cat's eye pupil will work just as well. We've got the washers for those safety eyes and a small amount of red felt, some black felt, some black thread or cotton for sewing on some of the details, a pair of scissors. The yarn that we're using is Premier Parfait Chunky, and I've got 1150-25 Azure, 1150-05 light blue, 1150-10 black, and 1150-45 pink lemonade. Now this one's optional, you only need it if you want to make the tongue for the tiger that's poking out. And then last but not least, we have a 5mm crochet hook, which is size 8 according to this handle. So we're going to start our pattern with a magic ring that has 8 single crochets worked into it. And when I'm working with chenille yarn, I usually skip the magic ring and use the chain 2 method. So what we're going to do is we'll start with creating this upside down U shape. We're just going to grab the top of that shape and cross it over so that we've got this point where the yarn meets. We'll pinch that point with our thumb and ring finger and then reach through this loop that we've created and grab the working yarn. So that's the yarn that is still attached to our ball, whereas the tail end is this end that we've cut here. And then once you've pulled that loop through, you can grab that tail and pull it gently until we've created a slip knot. And then we're going to insert our crochet hook into this big loop, hold the knot there for stability, and pull the working yarn gently to close that on our crochet hook. So we've created the slip knot, and now we're going to chain 2. So you want to wrap your yarn over your crochet hook and pull it through the loop that's on your hook. That's one chain. Then you want to do that again, and that's our second chain. So now we're going to work 8 single crochets into the first chain that we created, which is also called the second chain from the hook. This is the first chain from the hook and then the second one. So you're going to insert your crochet hook into that chain there, yarn over, so wrap the yarn over your crochet hook, draw it through that chain. Now you have 2 loops on your hook. You want to yarn over and draw through both of those loops. And that is our first single crochet complete. And I'm just going to mark this stitch with a stitch marker. So you just take a stitch marker and insert it underneath both loops of that stitch we've just finished. And that's going to help us find our beginning of round. Now we've got 8 single crochets in total worked into this stitch, so we're going to work 7 more. So just like we did before, insert your crochet hook into that same spot, yarn over and pull through. You've got 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and draw through both of those loops. That is your second single crochet. We'll do it again, insert, yarn over, draw through, yarn over again and draw through both loops. That's 3. We'll repeat again for 4, 5, 6, 7, and we now have 8 single crochets total in our round. And you can see that we've got our first stitch of our next round here marked so that it's nice and easy to find. So for round 2, we're just going to do an increase in every stitch around. So an increase is 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch. To start with, we're going to move our beginning of round stitch marker, so just take it out of the spot it's in, but remember where it is that it marks, and then you can move it onto the loop that's on your crochet hook. And now we'll know where to start when we get to round 3. So we're going to work the first single crochet of the increase, just like we did for the magic circle. So we're going to insert it underneath both loops of that stitch that was marked by the marker, yarn over, pull through. You now have 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and draw through again. So that's the first single crochet of our increase. Now we're going to go straight back into that same stitch and work a second single crochet. We've now turned 1 stitch into 2, and that's what an increase is. So we have done our first increase, and now we'll move on to the next stitch and do another increase in here. Now with chenille yarn, it can be really tricky to see your stitches, particularly if you're a beginner to it. So I recommend getting used to what the stitches feel like. You can generally, if you pinch it a little bit, feel the hole where your crochet hook is supposed to go. But while you're still learning, feel free to use as many stitch markers as you need to keep track of where you should be inserting your crochet hook. So we've done 2 increases. We're just going to do an increase in every stitch of this round, which is 8 increases total, which means we will bring the count of our round from 8 stitches to 16. Alright, and we're here at our stitch marker again. We have finished round 2, so there should be 16 stitches total in the round. And for round 3, we're going to be adding 8 stitches again, but we're also going to be working the ears of the tiger in this round, which means that we will be encountering a new stitch, which is the bobble. So to start with, we're going to do an increase in the first stitch, then a single crochet, and then an increase again, and then we'll work our bobble. So let's do that first increase. That's 2 single crochets worked into the same stitch, and then our next stitch is a single crochet, so just 1, and then the third stitch is another increase. And now we're actually going to change colors. Now for this tiger pattern, I've been testing out a new way of changing colors. So this may be different to how you change colors if you already are a little bit familiar with amigurumi. But what we're going to do is we're just going to open up that loop a little bit, take our crochet hook out, and then you want to insert it straight into the middle of the stitch here. So where the V is, you want to insert your crochet hook in the middle of that stitch, and then through the middle of the second part of the loop as well. And you can leave this loop here. You want to grab your new color, so in this case we're switching to black, and just put that on the hook there and draw it through both of those loops. And now you are ready to keep working in the black. Now anywhere that I use that method to change colors, you are welcome to change colors in whatever way you are used to or you prefer. I just find that with chenille yarn I get a little bit more peek through of different colors on either side of the stitch, and this color change method helps me avoid that. So for now we're just going to ignore this open loop and tuck it behind, and we're going to work our 4 double crochet bobble stitch. So in order to do that, we're going to yarn over as the first step, insert our crochet hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through. We now have 3 loops on our crochet hook. I'm going to yarn over and draw through 2 of those loops, and then we have worked the first double crochet of our bobble, and we're ready to work those same steps 3 more times until we have 4 double crochets total in our bobble stitch. So yarn over again, insert back into that same spot, yarn over, pull through. You have 4 loops on your hook, yarn over and draw through the first 2 loops that are on your hook. That's 2 double crochets in our bobble. So yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, draw through 2 loops on your hook. That's 3. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and then draw through the first 2 loops on your crochet hook. and we now have 4 double crochets worked into our bobble. Now this can be really tricky to see, particularly in the black yarn, so I do have a standalone bobble stitch tutorial on the channel if you're interested in seeing it in a color that's a little bit easier to see what's going on. So now we are ready to complete this bobble, but because the next stitch we want to work is an increase in the blue color again, I'm actually going to finish this last step of the bobble stitch off with the blue color. So at this point we can pull that blue yarn that we left, and that will get rid of that little loop that was left over, and then you can just yarn over in that blue yarn and pull it through all of the loops that are left on your hook. And that is our finished 4 double crochet bobble stitch. Our next stitch is going to be an increase, and I like to make sure that the bobble stitch is in front of my crochet hook when I insert it into the next stitch, just to help keep it nice and puffy. And then you can yarn over, draw through, yarn over, and finish our first single crochet of our increase, back into that same stitch, and complete our second increase. Now I like to cut the black yarn and then just knot those two ends together for a little bit of extra stability. And now we're going to do a single crochet and an increase in the next stitch, and then repeat that 3 times before we're ready to work the next ear. So there's a single crochet in the next stitch, then an increase. That's our first repeat, a single crochet, then an increase. That's our second repeat, a single crochet, and then an increase. And now we are ready to change colors again. So open up the loop, insert your crochet hook in the middle of both of those loops of the stitch, grab your black yarn, put that loop on the hook and pull it through. And now we are ready to work our 4 double crochet bobble for the second ear. So yarn over and insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, draw through the first 2 loops, and then repeat 2, 3, 4, and then when we're ready to finish that bobble, we can pull the blue yarn to close up that loop, yarn over and pull through all of the loops left on the hook. And again, the stitch after the bobble is an increase. We'll just poke that ear out a little bit and then cut and knot the ends at the back. Okay, so we've done our increase after the ear, and then it's just a single crochet, an increase, and a single crochet to finish. So for round 3, we have added 8 stitches, just like we did for round 2. And typically the pattern would be an increase and a single crochet repeated all the way around. But this one's a little bit more interesting because we've added ears. All right, we are ready for round 4, which is nice and simple. We're just going to do a single crochet in every stitch in the round. Now rounds 5 and 6 are the same, and we're going to start incorporating some of the color changes for the eyes. So the first 8 stitches of the round, we're just going to do a single crochet in each stitch, continuing in the blue Azure color. And 8. Then we're going to switch to light blue for the next 3 colors. So open up that loop, insert your crochet hook in between the stitches, grab your blue yarn, your light blue yarn, put that on the hook and pull it through. We're going to work 3 stitches in the light blue yarn. 1, 2, 3. And then we'll do the same thing, open up that loop, pull the previous one closed, and I like to cut my yarn at every color change and knot it together at the back just so that I can be really sure that those stitches are going to stay nice and neat and sit where I want them to the entire time. And then, just as we did before, inserting our crochet hook in between the stitch, grabbing the blue yarn, putting that back on the hook, and then we'll work 2 stitches in the darker blue yarn, we can close that one, cut it. Now obviously this takes a little bit longer than if you were to carry the yarn all the way through, but I don't mind taking the time to do it just because I prefer the way that it looks. In between both loops of those stitches, grab the new color, draw it through, and then we do 3 stitches in the light blue color for the second eye. And then back to dark blue for the rest of the round. And then round 6 is exactly the same as round 5, so we're just going to do those color changes again. So for row 7, it's just a single crochet in each stitch all the way around in the same dark blue, so nice simple row. And so for row 8, we're going to work the tongue as part of this round. If you have made my duck crochet pattern before, you'll be a little bit familiar with the steps because it's a sort of modified version of that. So we're going to start by working 12 single crochets in our blue yarn. Okay, so that's the 12th stitch. And now we're going to change to our pink, so open up the loop, insert in between those stitches, grab your pink yarn and draw that through, and then we're going to work quite a few stitches into the front loop only of the next round. So I'm actually going to grab a stitch marker and I'm going to mark, so each stitch is made up of a front loop and a back loop, and I'm going to place a stitch marker on the back loop of the next stitch so that we can find it a little bit easier when we get to it next round. And I'm going to be working all of my stitches for the tongue into the front loop only of the next stitch. So insert your crochet hook underneath the front loop only, yarn over and draw through. You have 2 loops on your hook. You're just going to draw 1 loop through the other, and that is a slip stitch. Now we're going to chain 1 just to give us a little bit of extra height. Going to yarn over, insert back underneath the front loop only, yarn over again and draw through, and then we've got 3 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over and draw through all 3 of those loops, and that is our half double crochet. We're going to chain 1 again, insert back into that front loop only that we've been going in this whole time, and then we're going to grab the blue yarn, pull that loop from our color change closed, tuck these pink tails out of the way, and I'm just going to make sure that that stitch marker is sitting in front. We're going to yarn over in the blue yarn, draw through, and then we're going to just pull it through that pink loop on our hook to complete another slip stitch. So there's a lot going on in that particular stitch, but it gives us this little pokey outy tongue that will look a little bit better as we continue working. And now we are ready to finish the round, which is just a single crochet in all of the remaining stitches, and there are 11 stitches left in the round. You can also actually cut that pink yarn, so we'll do a single crochet in the remaining 11 stitches. And that is the end of row 8. For row 9, we're going to start decreasing stitches. So basically shrinking the shape of the head in so that it starts to sort of round out. Here's how we're looking so far. So the repeat that we'll be doing for row 9 is we'll do a single crochet in the first stitch and then a decrease across the next 2 stitches, and we'll repeat that 8 times. So start with a single crochet, and then we're going to do a decrease. So you want to insert your crochet hook underneath the front loop only of the next stitch, and then go straight under the front loop of the stitch next to it. So we're basically joining 2 stitches together to become one. We can yarn over and draw through. You've got 2 loops on your hook like you would for a single crochet, yarn over and draw through both loops. And that is our invisible decrease finished. So we'll do a repeat again, so a single crochet in the next stitch, and then our decrease, so under the front loop only of the next stitch, straight under the front loop of the stitch next to it, yarn over and draw through, and then yarn over to finish off that single crochet or that invisible decrease. We'll do another repeat, a single crochet, a decrease, a single crochet, a decrease, and then we reach the point in the round where we did the tongue from last round, and this is where we have our yellow stitch marker that we left to mark the back loop of that stitch that we made the tongue in. So what we're going to do here is you want to insert your crochet hook underneath that loop. It can be a little bit tricky because there's a lot going on. Ooh. It's even trickier when the stitch marker is still in place, so if you are confident that you can keep track of it, you can remove the stitch marker. So insert your crochet hook underneath that back loop of the stitch from last round, then you can remove your stitch marker, yarn over and draw through, and then finish your single crochet that way. And then our next stitch is a decrease. So you want to insert your crochet hook underneath that front loop of the next one, the front loop of the one next to it as well, and then finish our decrease. And then after I finished that single crochet and decrease of that tricky part there with the tongue, you can see that it's nice and neat and all of the tails are tucked away inside. And I like to just really make sure everything is squared away by just giving those tails a little bit of a tug and then tying them together in a knot to make sure everything's nice and secure and neat and tidy. And that is our little tongue finished off, and it's a really neat way to sort of have something poking out basically, like a duck beak or a tiger tongue. And have everything be nice and neat and tidy without having to sew any pieces on later. Alright, and so we'll continue the repeat, so we are a single crochet and then a decrease until we've reached the end of the round. And then for row 10 we're decreasing again, but we're only doing half as many, so we're going to start with 2 single crochets and then a decrease and repeat that 4 times. So a single crochet, and then a second single crochet, and then a decrease. And then repeat that 4 times total. And at this point, we basically have finished our little head shape. So what we're going to do at this point is insert the safety eyes and then do a little bit of stuffing. So you want to grab your red felt and your scissors, and then I just cut this into 2 pieces. And I'm going to fold the felt in half and cut a little cross here, so just a little bit of an opening, and then fold it the other way and do the same thing to create a little hole in the middle of the felt that we can poke our safety eye into, our post of our safety eye. And this red felt is going to be the backing of our eye. So we want to create a sort of almond diamondy shape thing. And I find it easier just to cut basically around the safety eye to get the shape that I want. So I'm just going to cut the top half. And I usually try to go a little bit bigger than I want it to be because I can always cut more, but I can't add the material back. So here's my big diamond shape, and I'm just going to trim those corners a little bit more. And I've done this a couple of times now, so I know what kind of shape I want, but it can help to insert it periodically into your doll to see if you like the placement. Now, I put the safety eyes, because we have these color changes, it can be nice and easy to position them. So I like to place it into this spot here. So one stitch across from the inner line of the eye, and then in line with the bottom of the color changes. And that's the stitch where I like to place my safety eye. And you can see how it looks, and if you're happy with it. And actually use the first one as a guide to cut out the second one, but I start with the same little cross just to fit the post in. And then I will use that as a guide, that first piece, just by laying it on top, holding it in place, and then cutting around it. And then that way I know my eyes will be at least a little bit symmetrical. They don't need to be perfect. Eyes and eyebrows are sisters, not twins, right? I'm pretty happy with that. So now I will add in my posts, my washes, and the shape of the felt will change a little bit when you insert these washes, just because everything is kind of getting pushed and squished together, and it generally means that they shrink, and you want to make sure that you get a good little click from your safety eye washer, and that's nice and in place. And you can see that one of them is like pressed a little bit more flat and squished than the other one. And there we are. Now we've got both of them in place, and I'll grab my stuffing and give this head some shape. Alright, so I have my stuffing here, which is hard to see on this background, but it's just your standard polyester fiberfill. And I'm just going to start breaking it into small chunks and poking it in there. Now I like to make sure I'm not catching or pushing the safety eye posts in any particular direction with the stuffing, and making sure that they have sort of an even surrounding, just to make sure that they don't get pushed in some funny direction. And that will help them sort of stay in place and look like they're looking straight ahead. It doesn't take very much stuffing. You want the doll to still be pretty bouncy and squishy, but to hold its shape really easily. That's enough for me for now. We can always add more later because we've still got a little bit of crocheting to do. And now we have stuffed the head. We've basically finished the head part of this sort of all-in-one head and body crochet piece. Now we are ready to start increasing again and create the body shape. And we're going to do all of the stitches in this round in the front loop only, and that's to sort of help us get a nice definition between the neck and the body, so it will help give a little bit of shape and definition to that neckline. And we're going to be following a pattern of an increase and then a single crochet in the next 2 stitches. It's going to be a little bit broken up by some color changes so that we can get a lighter chest for our tiger. So we'll start with an increase in the first stitch, and again worked only under the front loop of all of the stitches in this round. So we'll do an increase, it's the first single crochet back into the front loop only to finish off our increase, And then the next 2 stitches are single crochets, again only the front loop only. 1, 2. Then we'll start repeating that pattern, so we have another increase, and then 2 single crochets, but the first one's going to be in the darker blue color, and then we're going to do our color change here into the lighter blue. And the light blue color is still worked into the front loop only for the entire round, so we'll do the second single crochet, and then we're back to the start of our repeat, so we'll do an increase, and then a single crochet, and again at this point we will switch back to the dark blue color to finish off the repeat. So we'll do our second single crochet, and then our last repeat, so an increase, and then a single crochet in the final 2 stitches. And that is the end of round 11. And so for row 12 we're back to working regular single crochets, so underneath both loops of the stitches as we're working them. And for this round we're going to do a single crochet in each stitch around, and we're just going to match up with the color change from the previous round. So we'll do the first 7 stitches in the darker blue, the next 4 in light blue, and then the final 5 in dark blue. And you'll notice that our stitch count has gone a little bit lopsided just because of the way that our stitches will tend to sort of naturally angle as we work in the round. Sometimes the color changes and stitch counts get a little off center to help counteract some of that twist. So we'll do our 7 stitches in dark blue, the next 4 in light blue, and the final 5 back in dark blue. And for round 13 we're going to keep increasing and also lining up with these color changes while shrinking them a little, which means that our increase pattern is a little bit weird, just to make it all line up, but it works itself out in the end. So we're going to do a single crochet in the first 3 stitches and then an increase, and repeat that twice. So let's start with that. We'll do a single crochet in the first 3 stitches, then an increase, and we'll repeat that pattern again, so a single crochet in the next 3 stitches, and then an increase, and then we're going to swap to the light blue to do a single crochet in the next 2 stitches. And then back to the dark blue, and we'll do an increase, and then a single crochet in the next 2 stitches, and repeat that again until we reach the end of the round. So we've done our increase, a single crochet in 2 stitches, and then an increase again, and a single crochet in the last 2 stitches. And then it's nice and simple for row 14. We're just going to do a single crochet in each stitch around in the same dark blue. For row 15, we're going to start concentrating some increases here at the back, just to help give it a little bit of a butt basically. So we're adding some increases here to create shape here without affecting the shape at the front. So the first 4 stitches we're going to work an increase in each of those. And it's a little bit bulky, and you can kind of see how it creates that little shape. And then it's just a single crochet in the rest of the stitches in the round, so it should be 16 single crochets. Okay, and for round 16 we're going to create a space for the tail to be picked up later, and we're also going to do the feet in the same round. So we're going to start with a single crochet in the first 2 stitches, and then we're actually going to chain 2, so 1, 2. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, so we've got 1 stitch here, 2 stitches here. We're going to insert our crochet hook underneath the 3rd stitch and complete a single crochet. And now we have this gap here that we've left behind that we'll use later to pick up stitches for the tail so that we don't have to sew it on. And then we'll do 8 more single crochets until we basically have finished the 13th stitch of the round. And then we're going to change to light blue. We're going to work a 3 double crochet popcorn stitch for the feet. Change to your light blue, and then to work a popcorn stitch, it's similar to a bobble stitch but a little bit different, and they have a slightly different look to them, and I just prefer one for ears and one for feet. So to start our popcorn stitch, we're going to yarn over, insert into the next stitch, yarn over again and draw through. You have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over and draw through 2 of those loops. You'll remember that's quite similar to a bobble stitch so far. And then you're going to yarn over and draw through the remaining 2 loops to basically complete a double crochet. And at this point I'm just going to tug that leftover loop from the color change just to get it out of the way. So we've done 1 double crochet. We're going to work 2 more double crochets into the same stitch because this is a 3 double crochet popcorn stitch over the first 2, and then the 3rd one. And so unlike a bobble stitch, we only have 1 loop left on our crochet hook at the end of each step. So you want to open up that loop, take your crochet hook out and insert it underneath the first stitch that we completed as part of a popcorn stitch, which when we've done a color change like this is nice and easy to remember. But if you're working all in the same color, stitch markers can really help you keep your place for this. Then you want to put your open loop back on the crochet hook and just pull it to tighten. You've got 2 loops left on your crochet hook, and you want to yarn over and pull through both of those loops to finish, but because the next stitch we want to do is in blue, I'm going to do that final yarn over in the dark blue so that we have the right color for our next stitch. And then we're going to do a single crochet in the next 2 stitches, and like with the bobble, I like to make sure that my crochet hook is sitting in front of that popcorn stitch to really help it pop. 2, and then we'll just repeat that again for the other foot. So switch to the light blue color, switch to that blue. We're going to work 3 double crochets into the next stitch, and just close that loop on the first one. And then you can open up the loop that you're working, insert it underneath the first stitch that you completed as part of the popcorn, put the loop back on the hook and close it up, and then do the final yarn over in that dark blue color. And then we've completed the second foot, and then it's just a single crochet in the remaining 7 stitches in the round. So now we're going to start closing up our tiger. So for this round we're going to do a decrease followed by a single crochet and then continue to repeat that pattern all the way around. And like we did when we created the neck, we worked all of those stitches in the front loop only. In this case we're going to work all of the stitches in the back loop only because we're trying to help a curve that goes in the opposite direction, and hopefully that makes sense. So I'm going to do a regular decrease instead of the invisible decrease that I showed you before, since we're working in the back loops. So we'll start with a decrease. So insert your crochet hook under the back loop only of the next stitch, yarn over and draw through. you have 2 loops on your hook. You want to go straight into the back loop of the stitch next to it, yarn over and draw through. You now have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and draw through all 3 of those loops. So like the invisible decrease, we're turning 2 stitches into 1, but in the regular decrease you pick up a loop at each step. So we're going to do a single crochet through the back loop only of the next stitch, and that's a decrease and a single crochet as part of our pattern, and we'll repeat that 8 times around. So let's do the decrease again. Insert into the back loop of the next stitch, yarn over, draw through, and then again into the back loop of the stitch next to it, yarn over and draw through, so that we have 3 loops on our hook, yarn over and draw through all 3 to complete the decrease, and then a single crochet. And we'll keep repeating that until we reach our stitch marker. Now when you get to your popcorn stitches, it might not be possible to grab the back loop, in which case it's not super important. We'll do the back loop for the stitch before it, and then just underneath both loops for the popcorn stitch to finish off our decrease, just to make it easier on ourselves. Now we've reached the end of round 17, and you can sort of see how that back loop only creates this line, which hopefully helps everything sort of fold and sit. And that's just something to be aware of when you go to stuff your tiger, is if you stuff it too much, then that back loop only round kind of doesn't matter anymore. So up to you how much you want to stuff it to try and keep that sort of flat bottom, which just helps it sit a little bit better. So I'm going to start stuffing my body now. We have 1 round of crochet to go before we can finish him off. Just like we did for the head, I'm breaking the stuffing up into small pieces and just poking it and shaping it as I go, and I like to squish my little doll. And that's probably enough stuffing for me. He holds his shape, but I can still squish it flat so that he sits. Alright, and with that we are ready to work the last round of the body, which is just a decrease in each stitch. So we're going from 16 stitches to 8 stitches, and I'm going to work invisible decreases because they tend to be my default unless I can't do them, like when we're working in the back loop only. But the thing about decreases is they both work, and you can just pick whichever one you prefer doing. And that's 8. Going to remove our end of round stitch marker because we don't need it anymore. And then I'm just going to cut the yarn, pull my crochet hook out to pull that tail through. And then you want to thread the tail onto a yarn needle. And to close the doll up, we're just going to take our yarn needle and insert it underneath the front loop of the next stitch, just like we would if we were crocheting it. Draw that through, but don't pull it too tight. And then again, from the outside in into the front loop of the next stitch, and keep doing this all the way around until you've gone through all 8 stitches. And once you've gone through all 8 stitches, you can then gently pull that closed to tighten up that hole. And particularly with chenille yarn, it can help to sort of hold it a little bit at that point where it's pulling, just to help reduce any shedding or breakage. If you're really struggling with the chenille yarn, you can actually do this close with like acrylic or wool or something that's a little sturdier, and it will get the same effect because, as you can see, it sort of disappears into there anyway. And then I like to thread my yarn needle underneath that last round just to help hide it and help stabilize it. And then in through the center and just out a stitch in the body. And I like to try and pull it a bit to sort of create an indent there, because that's going to help your doll sit a little better if he has a flatter bottom. Alright, and we are almost done with the crocheting for our tiger before we move on to detailing. The last little thing left to do is to pick up the tail. So you can see here that we've left a little hole here where we skipped those stitches and did a chain. And we're going to pick up a round of 6 stitches here and finish the tail. So take your blue yarn. We have here the 2 stitches that we skipped, the 2 chains that we did, and then there's sort of a spot in the middle of the row here on either side, and these are the 6 stitches that we'll pick up. So 1 chain, a second one from the chain, 1 from the middle of the row, 1 that we skipped, another one that we skipped, and then another one from the middle of the row. And those are the 6 stitches that we're going to pick up, and I like to start with one of the chains. So you're just going to put a loop on your crochet hook, and for the very first stitch we're just going to chain 1, go back into that same stitch and work a single crochet. And that is the first stitch that we've picked up, and then pull the tail of your yarn there just to tighten that starting chain. So we've got 1 stitch here. I'm going to add a stitch marker to mark our beginning of round, and then I'm going to pick my second stitch up from the chain next to it and complete a single crochet. And then my third stitch I'm going to pick up from basically in between the rows and complete a single crochet. Then there's the stitches we skipped, so the 4th stitch comes from one of those, and then the 5th stitch from the one next to it. And then the last stitch we're picking up is just like we did on the other side, in between the row. And we now have a round of 6 stitches. I'm just going to open that loop up and then use the end of my crochet hook to poke that tail out of the way. So that first row of stitches that we've picked up counts as our first round. So I'm going to do 4 rounds total, so another 3 rounds of 6 single crochets in each round in this blue color before I switch to the black. So round 2, we're just going to start in that first stitch that we picked up that was previously marked by the marker. And that is 4 rows now that I've done in the blue. I'm just going to change to black and do a further 2 rows in the black. Alright, and then we've done 4 rows in blue and 2 rows in black. I'm just going to cut the black yarn and finish off the end of this tail the same way we did the end of the body. So just threading it onto a yarn needle, going through the front loop only of each of the last stitches in the round just to close that circle up and give it a nice pointy tip. And then we have finished all of the crochet parts of this derpy tiger. So well done if you followed all of the strange stitch counts and shaping up until now. And the last thing left to do is we're going to do a bunch of detailing to add some different stripes everywhere and give him his very distinguished face. Okay, so now that we're finished crocheting, it's time to do all of the detailing for our little tiger. So we're going to be adding some stripes to the tail, to the back of the head and the body, and we're also going to be adding stripes and a little detailing to the eyes. So to start with, I'm going to take my cotton thread and just outline the eyes and a little bit of the mouth, and that's the first step that we'll do. So you're just going to grab a length of either black cotton thread or I've got yarn here, just a DK weight yarn, and you don't need a huge amount of the black. We're just going to thread that onto a yarn needle, and the reason that I use a thinner yarn or a thinner cotton for the eyes and the mouth is just because the detail is a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to insert my yarn needle on the side here somewhere and come out at the inner eye, at the inner corner of where the felt part of the eye ends. And just thread that through, leave enough of a tail here so that we can tie a knot when we're finished. And I'm just going to basically outline the top of that eye. So we'll go back in on the other corner and I'll bring it out to the other side, so to the inner corner of the second eye. And when you pull that one, you can just make sure that it lines up. And you can just make sure that it lines up with the top of the eye there. And it just creates a little bit of an outline. And you can do the underline as well in the same fashion if you want, but I usually just do the top, just because I like the way that it looks. And then we'll do the same for the other side. And then this time I'm going to come out here at the top of the tongue in the middle. And the same thing, just pull it so that it provides a little outline for the top of the eye. And then for the mouth, I'm just going to basically follow the line of the tongue and then go in a stitch across one and then sort of down and come out at the same side on the other side. And then back in that center spot and out to meet our initial entry point. And that's just a little bit of detailing there to help outline the mouth and the eyes. And then I like to knot those two ends together. Cut the yarn. And then just hide it back in the body. And to grab it, I'm just inserting my yarn needle and then going back and forward to pull those threads back inside the body. And that's all we use the little cotton thread for. Now I'm going to grab a length of the light blue yarn that we were using before, and we're going to use this for the stripes. Now chenille yarn, as you may have seen during this tutorial or be familiar with, tends to shed a little bit. So sometimes it's easier to work in smaller strips to help reduce how often that sheds. So the stripes are actually going to go on the tail and at the back of the body. And when I tried to watch the movie again to get some references, the tiger has these sort of like diagonal stripes that go down. So we're going to recreate those. But we'll start with the tail. So I'm just going to go inside here and I'll come out the bottom of the tail and I'll just do 2 stripes on the tail. Same as we did before, leaving a tail there to tie together later. And I just wrap it around the tail, go back in at the same point I came out and then go up one. And wrap it again, back in that same point. And then this time I will come out in the center of the back, about there. And oops, better make sure that that is wrapped around. And as for where I position the stripes on the back, I'll be honest, it's a little bit different between each attempt, but I like to try and fit 2 stripes on the back and 2 stripes on the head. So I'm just going to go over about 2 stitches and then down a row. And then I'll try to make that pretty even on the other side where I poke the needle out. And I'm not pulling these stripes too tightly because I don't want them to be super thin. And then I'll go up 2 rows. And having an angled needle tip can help quite a lot for these sort of embroidery details. There we are. And then I'll do the same thing, just going down at a slight angle. And then again out the head. So there's nothing too fancy or difficult going on here. Actually might move that over one more. And it's pretty easy to adjust like that as well if you need to or if you want to. And then that's going to be my last little stripe in the light blue, so I will try and meet it back at the point where we came out, which sometimes I need to make a little stop halfway to get there. There we are. And again, I'll knot those 2 ends together. And as you can see, my light blue yarn did not shed very much there, which is nice and handy. The black yarn that I have is much softer and tends to shed a lot more. Alright, and now we're just going to basically outline all of those stripes that we've just done in black. So it's the same process, only we're going to do, I'm just going to go in on the side here, basically 2 passes every time because we're creating an outline. And it helps to sort of angle or hold your yarn into the position you want it to sit in, just to make sure that we don't lose any of that light blue on the inside. And as you can see, my black yarn is already shedding a lot more than the blue did. So that's one outline. And I'm also just picking out any stuffing that gets pulled through. And because my black yarn sheds quite a lot, and also because we're outlining, so we're using twice as much as we did for the blue, I'm going to work in smaller sections. So I'll do the head and then a new thread for the body and the tail. And then it's just the same thing for the rest of the stripes. And if you start to lose that middle piece, you can also poke your yarn needle under there to help bring it back up to the front again, so it doesn't get lost in the black. And for the tail, because they all come out of the same stitch, I usually do an outline of the bottom stripes and then I go back and do an outline of the top ones, because that lets me jump between the stitches. So that is the stripe detailing at the back end for the tail of the tiger done. And then the very last thing left to do is to give him some little stripes on his face and do the little dots in the middle of his forehead as well. And I like to use the color changes to help line up where I'm going to do the little eyebrows. So I'm just going to go in underneath the ear and then out this stitch here, excuse me, and then out this stitch here where our color changes first started, leaving that little tail again, and then I'll go back in at the edge of the color change here and down in the middle row, and then out again, one row above that. And then you can kind of see that that creates a bit of a curve, and you can sort of hold it in place as it is being drawn through to help it sort of sit the way that you want it to. And then I'll just repeat that shape, and it's just going one stitch above where we entered for the last one, and then out the same section, so in line with the color change. It looks like it's coming out of a blue stitch here just because of the way my color changes look on the right versus left hand side. There we are, we've got two stripes on one side. And then the same thing, we're going in the middle of the color changes on the other side, and then in line with the first eyebrow, one row above. Now you can try to use this same black yarn to create the sort of spots in the center, but I just found I wasn't super happy with how they were looking. I couldn't quite get them to be circular enough. So instead, because I already have the materials, I like to take a tiny bit of black felt and just cut some itsy bitsy circles out of them. There's my tiny felt circle, and he just sits in line with the stripes, and I'll do a second one. And that creates a much nicer circle shape than I was able to with the thread. So we'll just secure those using some glue. I've got a quick dry adhesive, something like a hot glue gun would work, or a fabric glue. And we'll just do a tiny little dot. And that's probably enough glue for both of them, so I'm just going to mush them together to grab some of the excess off the first one. And then you can just press them in place. And there is our little finished Kpop Demon Hunters derpy tiger, I think he's called. This tutorial is a little bit more detailed than some of my other ones, and certainly a little bit more complex with all the detailing than the other no-sew cats that I've been working on, but what a satisfying color palette. I'm super happy with his little pokey tongue, and I hope you guys love him too. Until next time, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel, and we will see you for the next pattern. Excuse me. This is how all of my projects end up covered in cat hair.